Hey everybody, what's up? Jeffrey Way here. Welcome to a brand new series called JavaScript from Null. So especially in the last 2 to 3 years with the release of all these libraries like jQuery and Mootools and all that, JavaScript has boomed. It has skyrocketed. But with that, we've also ended up with a lot of people who have a pretty decent understanding of how to use a library, but not as much understanding of how to use raw JavaScript. So that's what this series is for. We're not going to focus on any library. We're going to start from scratch, literally creating our first Hello World alert, and then we're going to work our way through screencasts into more advanced topics like animations, event bubbling, and things of that nature. So I hope you enjoy it, and if you're brand new to JavaScript, you have really no clue how to get started, this series is going to be for you. Alright, so the first thing, what do you need to get started? Well, of course, you need a browser. JavaScript is not something that you install. It works on most browsers, assuming it's enabled. So you need a browser. Firefox is considered the best one for web developers. The main reason being because of an extension called Firebug. So if you Google Firebug, it's basically a way to allow you to monitor, debug, edit your CSS and your JavaScript. So you can see here, this is how it will look, and there'll be a little panel at the bottom of your window, like so. You can see you can edit the CSS. In this case, I'm editing the information from this specific getfirebug.com page. You can examine the scripts that are included. You can browse through the DOM. It's essential. You have to have this. So Google Firebug or go to getfirebug.com and you're going to install Firebug. Remember, this is exclusive for Firefox. So it's going to install, ask you to refresh your browser, and when you do, you're going to have this new tab right here called Firebug, and to open it, you just click down here at the bottom of the little bug, and you're all set to go. Okay, that's one important thing. The only other thing I would recommend other than a text editor, in my case I'm going to be using TextMate, or you could use Coda. If you're on Windows, I recommend something called eText Editor. That one works great. It's very similar to TextMate. And the final thing I would recommend you get is something called the Web Developer Toolbar, created by Chris Pedrick. So if you come here, just Google it, and it's another add-on for Firefox. Now, if I go to View Toolbars and bring it back on the screen, you'll see we have many helpful options. One of them for this series that will be extremely helpful is just the ease of being able to disable JavaScript. Right, so. Okay, it also allows you to edit your CSS, so I could go here and I can edit the CSS in real time, so I could just delete all of that and you can see it immediately changes. If we want to change anchor tags, done. Okay, very important. You can also disable your stylings, you can work with forms, you can disable all images on the page, like so. Bring that back. And also you have things like you can outline elements, you can resize the page, you can do validation of your CSS and your HTML. You can do that on your server, or you can also do it locally. So a lot of really great stuff that I do recommend you download this one. Once again, it's an extension and we'll be using that as well. But for now, I'm going to hide it. Okay, so the first thing we want to do here is let's create a folder, and we're going to call this Chapter 1. Okay, I'm going to drag this into TextMate where we will begin. So we'll create a new file. Whoops. Let's create a new file, and we're going to call this index.html. So I'm going to paste in just a sample snippet here. If you saw, I typed in begin HTML. This is using a program called Text Expander, which I also recommend you take a look at. If you're on Windows, there's a program called Texter, and that one works as well. And it basically allows you to assign keystrokes to a shortcut. So if I want to paste that in, I just type in these characters. If I want to, additionally with TextMate we have bundles. So if I want, rather than creating script tags, I can just type script and it'll do it for me. So I do recommend that you create some kind of bundle or type expanding tool to shorten the process. Okay, so the hello world of JavaScript. We can place JavaScript either within our head, in our head tags, or we can place it within the body. In recent years, it's become extremely popular to place your JavaScript or import any any scripts just before the closing body tag, but you can also do it right in the head tag. So the way we tell the browser that we are working with JavaScript is we have to wrap it within tags. So we do script, type, and the type is text JavaScript. And then we need to be sure to close that script. So now when this is sent to the browser, it'll know anything within these tags needs to be interpreted as JavaScript. So the very first thing we're going to do is the hello world. We're going to use a JavaScript function called alert. And what this is going to do is it's going to display a little box on your browser, and it'll say whatever you like. So we'll write hello world. I'm going to save that, and we're going to come back and load this in Firefox. And sure enough, we get our alert box that'll work in all browsers. So, additionally, if we wanted to, let me go ahead and close that out. Additionally, if we would rather write that to the page, we can do something like, actually, you know what? We will keep that, and I'm going to comment it out. And to declare comments, we can just add 2 forward slashes, and that will disable anything on that current line. But if we continue, the next line will be rendered. Okay, so if we want to write it to the page, we can refer to the document browser object. And think of this as the document, think of it as representing the entire page. It gives you access to the page and anything within it, including elements and things like that. So if we went to document dot write, and this is going to write something to the page. So hello world. Come back, refresh the page, and now it's written it to the page. Now you want to make sure to remember, if we view the source of this page, you're not going to see anything written. You're just going to see our JavaScript. And remember, it's a client-side language, meaning we're not going to be editing the actual files. We're going to be from the client or from the browser. We are then going to add information or take away information or change information with JavaScript. Okay, so there's hello world. Now it's on the page. Additionally, we can create variables and send variables to the page. So for instance, what if instead here we created a variable, and to designate a variable we type in var, and that's just essentially saying we are creating a variable, and we're going to do a space and type in the name that we want. It can be anything you like. There are some keywords that you can't use, but we're not going to go into that just yet because it'll clutter your brain. So create a variable called sum var, and you can make this equal to just about anything. It can be equal to a function, it can be equal to a string of text, you know, a lot of things that we will go into. For now, we're just going to once again make it equal to hello world. And now if we want to alert that variable instead, we'll just do alert sum var. And now you'll see hello world. So this time, rather than pasting in a string, we actually referenced a variable. So if we change that to hello universe, it changes to hello universe. Okay. So the use of the var, that can be excluded. So for instance, if I took that away, it's still going to work. But you need to know 2 things. One, when you exclude var from the creation of a variable, it's going to assume that you want to create a global variable. Now, that's a little higher level than we're going to get into today, but once you start learning about things like scope, you will understand why it's generally not a good practice to create many global variables. So, second, remember, it's considered, even after the fact, it's considered a best practice to always use var to create a new variable. And we'll go into more of that in future screencasts. Okay, the next thing we're going to learn is how to create functions. So what is a function? Think of a function as a little snippet of code that performs one task. So let's say maybe, I don't know, maybe you want to update, or maybe you want to change a block of text. Now, you could do it manually, or if you're going to be referencing that constantly throughout your project, you might store it in a function that can be reused easily. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. So to declare a function, we type in function space, and then the name of our function, and usually this is going to be some kind of action. So we'll call it do something, just for example, and then we're going to add an open and closed parentheses, and you'll learn within here we can receive parameters, and we'll go into that just shortly. And anything within a function will be processed when the user calls this name, this function, in this case, do something. So we need to designate the beginning and the end of the function, and we do that with the braces. All right. So within here, once again, why don't we alert hello NetText readers. If I haven't gone over this yet, you need to make sure that with every statement you make, it needs to be closed with a semicolon. And notice here when we added the string, I didn't simply just type in that, because if we did, JavaScript would assume we were referring to some kind of long variable. If we want to tell it, no, we're referring to an actual string of text, we need to make sure that we wrap it within either double quotes or single quotes. And then, of course, we close it with a semicolon to designate that we are at the end of the statement. So, if we go back and refresh the page, you can find that nothing has happened. Okay, well, why didn't it happen? And the reason is we created a function, but we never actually referenced that function. So to do so, we simply called the name of the function, and we add this open close parentheses. We could pass values to our function, or we could not. Okay, and I'm going to end this with a semicolon because it's the end of a statement, of course. And now, if I refresh the page, it was called and it rendered hello NetText readers. Very cool. So let's say now that we want to alert hello and some kind of random name. How could we do that? And the way we do that is we pass it in through these parameters. So let's say we want to pass in Joe. So now when we call this function do something, it's going to receive Joe. But how do we reference that value? And the way is, there's a couple ways actually. We can refer to the arguments, or we can just hard code it in here and let's say name. And now name will be equal to Joe. So we will do alert, and we're going to do hello. And then we need to also reference a variable, so we can't just do hello name because it will assume that we are literally meaning hello name. So we need to say hello plus the variable called name. And the way with JavaScript we do that is using the plus symbol. So hello plus name. There you go. And now we get hello Joe. And I'm sorry, I added one more space. And now we get hello Joe. Additionally, once again, as we did with the variable up here, we can pass in a variable. So if we wanted to do something like variable name equals John, and now do something, we can pass in name. So now we pass in name or John. Function do something receives that variable and assigns it to this. Remember, it can be anything we want. We could do first name and do something like that. But it still refers to this, which refers to this. Hello, John. Pretty cool. Okay, so the next thing I want to show you is how to log things to our console. Remember, we downloaded this nifty Firebug, but we haven't used it yet. So, to show you, why don't we comment these out? And let's create, actually, we'll keep this variable up here. And if we want to display it, we could do the alert, or we could log it to the console. And the way we do that, remember, this is only going to work with Firefox, and you can get it to work with Safari, but it's not going to work in Internet Explorer. So we're going to do console.log. And additionally, you need to make sure when you're done working on your project that you remove any references to console.log. So we're going to log, and let's just do something simple first. Once again, hello. And now if I refresh the page, you're not going to see anything yet. But if I open up the console, you'll see hello. Cool. So you might be thinking, well, what is the advantage to that? And it's an extreme advantage. If you need to see, let's say, for some reason, let's say you call this function and it's not alerting hello first name. So you might be wondering, well, why is it doing that? Well, sometimes you could find yourself, well, let's just do a quick console log and see if that function is even being called. And if nothing is being logged, you know, okay, well, there's a problem where this function is never being called in the first place. And additionally, you can use it for debugging a variable, figuring out what's inside of a variable if you don't know. So here we could do console log name, and now we get John. Pretty cool. Additionally, when you're logging, you can mix strings and variables as well. So we could do first name plus the value of that variable. First name. Great. So how can we interact with the elements on our page? And we do that by using the document object model, or the DOM, if you've ever heard that. So once again, we'll be working with the document browser object, and let's say we have an element on our page. Let's give it maybe an h2, and this is my h2 tag. Something simple. How can we reference this? Let's say we just want to, in the console, display the text within this heading2 tag. How could you do that? We're going to do something called document get element by ID. You might have seen this before. This literally means get any elements. Remember, elements refer to an h2. If we had a div here, that would be its own element. If we had a p, that would be its own element. And it wants to refer to it by an ID, not by the tag name, which we will do later. So let's go ahead and give this an ID of heading. All right. So we're going to do document.getElementById, by ID, and within quotes, we're going to type in the name of the ID that we want, or heading. So if we do this, what's going to happen? Nothing is going to happen at all. How come? The reason is, well, we've gotten the ID, but we never did anything with it. So why don't we store what is retrieved inside of a variable? Variable heading is going to be equal to document.getElementById. So if we go back and refresh the page, still nothing has happened. And remember, we haven't done anything with it. So why don't we just log it to the console and see what comes up? Console.log heading. Come back, refresh the page, and if I load it up here, you're going to get null. So why is it coming with null? The reason is, it's a little more complicated here, but try to think in a linear fashion. The browser receives the page, it goes through the page, and it says var heading document.getElementById heading, log it, and then it goes and loads the rest of the page. So think of it. When we are telling it to get the element with an ID of heading, one doesn't exist on the page. It's not aware of one just yet. So it hasn't even read this yet. So heading is equal to null, as you can see right there. So how can you work around this? There's several different methods. Some of them a little more high level than we're going to get to in this first couple screencasts. But for now, what we're going to do as a workaround, and this is very common, we're going to take our script and we're going to place it at the bottom of the page just below the closing body tag. And now the page loads. It reads all of the elements, and then it loads the script. And now when we say document.getElementById heading, it knows, okay, well this one exists, so get this. And if we log heading now and refresh the page, you'll see that it refers to that entire element. Okay, well, what if we just wanted the value, right? We did not receive the value, so what can we do here? You have a bunch of different properties. So this is another advantage to using something like Firebug, because if you don't know them yet, in this case we would use inner HTML, but if you don't know them, you can search through here and find what's available to you. So I'm going to click on the Net tab, the DOM tab, and if we go up here, you'll see heading. Heading is referencing once again the variable that we created. Those will be available to us. So now if I open that up, we have all of these available to us via the property operator. The property operator simply is just the period. So if we did heading dot, that would be equal to the property operator, and then we can add any of these properties. So if we wanted to, for instance, know what the actual text was, as I said before, we would type in our HTML, and you can see right here, that's what it refers to. Okay. Additionally, as I just showed you, you can edit this. So if I clicked on it, new text, it changes that dynamically. But remember, once we refresh the page, nothing's being saved. We're just editing on the client side. It's going to revert back to what it was originally. So if we want to get that, we type in heading dot inner HTML. Save it, come back, refresh the page, and now if I click on console, it is correctly referencing that. You have a couple other options. You have plenty of options. Let's go back to the top and heading. Just take a look when you have time and go over everything that's available to you. All of these are available to you. So you could get the local name, which is what the heading to, the node name. You'll see that very often. So let's change that to heading.node name. Refresh the page, and now it does reference H2. Okay, what else should we show you today? There are other ways to access what we should show you. It's me. There are other ways to access elements on the page. So what if we had another element, and this is another heading? Okay. What if we wanted to reference both of these with JavaScript? Well, then we know that we can't assign more than one ID. We couldn't do this. Or technically we could, but it's bad practice and it's not going to validate. So what if we just want to get all heading 2 tags? How could we do that? Let's do it again. This time we're going to do var heading equals document.getElements by, and this time rather than ID, we're going to do get elements by tag name. Okay, and within parentheses, once again, we're going to type in, rather than an ID, the actual name, name of the node, in this case, H2. Okay, once again, let's log that to the console and comment that previous one out. And now you're going to get an array. Okay, so what are arrays? Think of arrays as a way of grouping information. Okay, so here we have 2 items in our array. However, when we reference them, we could do, if we assigned this, in this case, to heading, we could reference within brackets 0, 1, 2, 3, which will represent an index of the item we want. Now you need to remember arrays are 0 based, meaning the very first item in our array will actually have an index of 0. The second one will be 1. So in this case, if we wanted to reference this second H2 tag, this is another heading up here, we would do 1. Reference the first index, which would really be the second item. So how can we do this? We have console.log heading, and why don't we do something like get elements by tag name, and within here we're going to do brackets, and we're going to do 1, referencing the second one within that array, and if we want to get the text of it, we'll do inner HTML. Now look what we're doing here. This is a nice feature of JavaScript, is we can chain things together. So you notice we did document, and then we got all the elements with a tag name of H2, and then we got the first one, and then we continued chaining, and we got the contents of only that specific one. Now if I log this, you'll get this is another heading. If we were to change it to something like 0, it's going to return this one within the console, as you can see, like so. Now what if we wanted to actually change it? Let's say inner.html, and this time we're going to do something like this. Document.getElementsByTagName.innerHTML is going to be equal to changed from the client side. And now you can see with inner HTML, you can either return a value or you can assign a value. So here, this time, rather than just setting its current value to a variable, we changed it immediately. Changed from the client side. Very cool. The final thing, actually we'll do 2 more things before we call it a day with chapter 1. I want to show you that you can change styling. You can change CSS, or you can change the styles of your page. How can we do that? Once again, we're going to do document.getElementById, and we're going to get, once again, that heading element right here. And what if we wanted to change the text to red? We would do .style. We're going to continue shading, and we're going to get color, and it's going to be equal to anything we want. Let's do red. Save it, come back, and now as you can see, only this one was changed. You have available to you all of the stylings that you would normally use in your style sheets. If you want to do background color, you could do that. One thing important to notice is with JavaScript, we're not using dashes, we're using camel casing. So instead of background color, something like that, you instead use camel casing to represent the dashes. Like so. Okay, the final thing we are going to go over is scope. What is scope? To give you an example, a scope is a way of limiting the availability of variables you create. So for instance, think of the risk if every variable you created was a global variable and it was available within all of your functions. You could easily reassign variables, you could have naming collisions, you could have a lot of problems, especially if you're working on a big project. So it's smart where if you have functions to have scope where if you create a variable maybe within this do something variable, my var equals Joe, it's smart to do it this way because it's not available outside of the function, so you don't have to worry about any naming clashes. So let's see a test of this. I'm going to create a variable called my var, and it's going to be equal to Jeff. And once again, we're going to log that to the console. Get Jeff. Okay, let's create a function now. Do something else. Scroll down, and I'm going to create another variable. Another var equals Joe. And we're going to log that one, another var. There we go. And now we get Joe. So let's change this. Let's do console.log within function and copy that. And this time we're going to do outside of function, and this time we're also going to log another var, and let's see what happens. Another var is not defined. Why is this occurring? We created the variable right here within our function, so why is it not working now? And it's because of scope. We created the variable and it was bound to the scope of the function, and as soon as we left that function, it's not a global function, so it's no longer available to us. And that's why we're getting this another var is not defined error. Once again, a convenience of Firebug. So, how can we get the value of this variable outside of our function? And the way is, within a function, we can return something. So here, just remove that, and we're going to return the value of another var. Okay? So now when we call do something else, it's going to create a variable, and it's going to return that value to whatever called it. But here's another problem. We called this function, and it's going to receive the new value, but what is it going to be stored in? We're not doing anything with it. So why don't we do this? And remember, this is just for example. You probably wouldn't do this. But for example, let's create another var, and we're going to assign it to this function. Do something else. So let's go through the process once again. We call do something, it creates a variable, it returns another var, or it returns Joe, and that Joe value then gets assigned to this variable. And now if you come back and refresh the page, outside of function Joe. And that's how we were able to grab that value. So scope is an important thing. We're going to go over it in much more deeper and in more detail over the coming screencasts, but I think this is a good crash course on what JavaScript is, and we're going to look at some fun stuff. I'm going to teach you about tons of things. I'm going to teach you about animations and event bubbling and dealing with all of the different issues with different browsers that don't work together well, and you need to do a lot of compensation. But once you learn some of the intricacies of each browser, it'll get easier and easier for you. And if you're a JavaScript library user, it's going to make you even that much more better and more efficient when you're working on your projects. So I will see you guys next week, probably, maybe the week after, for Chapter 2. And as always, feel free to ask as many questions as you have, or if you have advice, please do let us know. And of course, for more tips and tutorials, always follow net.tutsplus.com and follow us at twitter.com/nettuts. My name is Jeffrey Way, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye.